Classic cars are old. Classical music is older. And classical architecture is really freaking old. Like 5th century BCE, ancient Greece old. And yet it's still influencing the way we design buildings today. Why? Well, the Greeks and Romans were absolutely bonkers about proportioning systems. The reason the classical orders are called orders is because the column diameter determined all of the dimensions of the building. Understanding these orders will help make your builds more realistic and help you be more intentional when you want to break them. Now, we tend to think of classical architecture as a primarily white architecture, but the reality is that the Greeks and Romans used a lot of color that has since faded over time. However, if you're going for a white look, here are a couple blocks that will definitely help you out. Any of the quartz family is really, really good. Got a lot of stair varieties, and they just have a lovely creamish color. Also, the new pale oak is another lovely, lovely block that it's a little bit more pink than the quartz, which is kind of yellowier, but it's got stairs, slabs, trapdoors, and it opens fences especially. Opens a lot of possibilities. Another option would be the diorite, calcite, and then concrete powder and wool family. This is a little bit more blue-ish in tint. And you can go with like a mushroom stem for a darker sort of white, or a real pinky white with the white terracotta. Or if you're going for something that's a little bit more worn down or exposed to the elements, you can use sandstone and bone block to get kind of a weathered white. Now, for colors, the ancient Greeks had a lot of rudimentary primary color dyes. So these kind of more, not the vibrant reds, but a little bit more muted red, the granite or terracotta or this mangrove wood provide a more earthy tone. And then they've got a lot of cyan and then like a colder blue. You could mix these, pick either one. And then yellow's another great option. Yellow concrete's pretty nice. It's not as overwhelmingly like artificial as some of the other concrete colors. Yellow terracotta is nice if you want a darker tone. Oak is good if you want like a slight yellow. Bamboo's a little greenier, and sandstone's good too if you want just a hint of yellow. And then they make use of a lot of black and earth colors. I should have added terracotta over here, but granite makes another appearance to get like an orangey kind of earth tone. You could go with like a brighter orange with the concrete powder. Orange concrete's a little bright, not really a color they would have had access to, but obviously you can do whatever you want. And these black tones are really nice. Blackstone is great because it's got that variety of blocks. Nether brick is another underrated one, and you can do a lot with the stairs and slabs and walls as well. And then over here are green and purple, not the most common colors. Green maybe more so. Purple is something that was really, really hard to get back in the day. And so like any kind of purple tone, these really, really saturated ones would really only be used with like royalty because they were the only ones that had the money to afford it. But like an earthier purple would kind of show up. And these greens also a little bit more muted, nothing limey, but like dark green, bluey green would also be a great choice. Now this brings us to the different orders of columns. And 15th century architect Vignola made a great documentation of the different orders and their dimensioning. So to start us off here, we've got Tuscan columns, which were a Roman order, so they came later than the Greek ones. And they've got 7 blocks of height for every 1 block of diameter. And if you notice, for the other columns, I've used the actual quartz column block. But for this one, we're going with a bone block because Tuscan columns are the only ones that didn't have any fluting, which is like the ridges that go down the length of the column. And these columns were relatively simple. Undecorated capital and base, it was just like a larger circle. And then up at the top, we've got an undecorated pediment. No ornamentation on this. And over here, we've got Doric columns, which are the earliest Greek column. They're 8 blocks tall for every 1 block in width. And as you can see here, there's no base on these. The column shaft runs right into the ground, but they do have the same kind of unornamented capital as the Tuscan columns. And then up here you can see the frieze has got alternating sort of like outer bands and then like inset ornamentation here. Normally on like a larger building, this would have some kind of figure in it. Now, Ionic columns are probably the most recognizable. They're a lot harder to build at this smaller scale, but we've got the return of the base here, and they've got 9 blocks of height for every 1 block of diameter. And so these are the ones you've seen with the kind of scroll shape capital here. And so with 1 block, it's a lot harder to do, but to try and keep a smaller profile without having it jut out a full block on either side, these new pale oak fence gates work pretty well, especially from a distance. They kind of evoke the same shape because of the gap in the fence. And then we're back to an unornamented pediment here at the top. Now, Corinthian columns are our most slender here. They've got 10 blocks of height for every 1 block of diameter. You can see here the capitals are going to be a little bit bigger on this one. These are the ones with the kind of leaf shape that comes out. And so I've used, glow lichen here, and then diorite, which kind of matches the same shape as the glow lichen. And then we've got a ornamented pediment here at the top. I've used diorite to get the stairs and walls and slabs. Our last order is composite columns, which are another Roman order, and they kind of combine the Corinthian columns with the Ionic columns. And this is another one that's hard to do, but to try and evoke the same feeling. First, these are the same height as the Corinthian columns, but they've got in their capital the mixture of the kind of leaf shape here and the scroll of the Ionic column. And so the scrolls should be in the corners, and then scaling up an Ionic and a Corinthian column with a 2-block diameter. You can see here you can use the bottom end of a pillar block to sort of give you that scroll, and then I put a button on the end to like make that center more distinct. And then with the Corinthian one, we've got this one's 3 blocks tall because it's not exactly twice the diameter. We've got walls here and then 2 sets of stairs to try and give off that leaf shape. And then moving on to the Roman architecture, the Romans introduced a lot of arches into their designs. They were really good engineers. And so this arch shape helps kind of distribute load across to either side while keeping this vault. And their arches were mainly semicircular. So one thing that they would build is a victory arch. So generals would return, actually I think it's a triumph arch. They would return and march through this arch that would span the entire width of the road. And then they would also use domes. The Romans had really strong concrete. It was one of their best feats of engineering. And so the Pantheon is a great example. It's the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. And they just use this shape to distribute the load down onto the walls and create these large open spaces. And Roman domes were semicircular in shape. It's not the most structurally efficient shape. That would be a catenary curve. But the shape that they did have for the technology they had was very, very structurally sound. So this is our kind of final example of a classical building. I got a Greek temple here, and we've got our Doric columns, and these are following the same proportioning rules. So they're 8 blocks tall for every 1 block wide, and since these have a 2-block diameter, these are 16 blocks tall. And then I'm going to correct myself from earlier. This part here below the roof part is our entablature, and it's this part that's the pediment, which is my bad. Please don't kill me in the comments. These parts here are our triglyphs, and they should be about evenly sized, but since we've got an odd number here, it's impossible to put the exact same width here, so I opted to make the ones in the middle a little smaller. But these guys line up with our columns. They form a nice even rhythm, and then in between the triglyphs we've got diorite walls and blocks and polished diorite, which gives off the effect that there's some detailing in there. Obviously at this scale it'd be impossible to make a little man, but from a distance this kind of reads as like the kind of detailing that you would see. And then up at the top on what is the pediment, is another kind of detailing representing larger figures. As you can see here, we're using the blue to kind of decorate here, and then we've got a granite roof to kind of emulate that kind of terracotta feeling. Now these columns are 5 blocks apart, which is 2.5 times the diameter of the column, and there are different styles of intercolumniation, and that one would be, referencing my notes, it would be U style. Different separations of columns will have different names. So if the columns are 1.5 the diameter apart, it'd be Pykno style. They're 2 diameters apart, it'd be Psi style. 2.5 U style. 3 would be Dia style, and then 4 is Area style. And this wasn't really used until much later, but you can have 2 columns directly next to each other, and it's just be called like a coupling. And this wasn't used back in the day, but it's often used in buildings now. Generally, Greek temples had an even number of columns, ranging from 4 to 8, and usually the more columns a building had, the more important it was. So obviously neoclassical architecture makes a lot of use of the columns, especially Ionic columns. Domes, you see a lot in Capitol buildings, and then the entablatures and pediments and all that jazz. Not always making the best attempt to stick to the same proportioning systems that Vignola laid out, but obviously borrowing a lot from the design. And so that's a super duper common use of classical architecture influencing today's architecture. But also there's a lot of cases of like stripped classicism, such as Edward Durrell Stone's U.S. Embassy in India, or the Kennedy Performing Arts Center in D.C. There's also the U.S. Embassy in Athens, which is a very fitting place, obviously, to have a kind of modernist version of classical architecture that's been like reduced of all of the like ornament and just taken down to its like bare forms. So from this, you can obviously recreate classical buildings, but you also can understand the kind of proportioning system and use it to create more modern versions of classical proportions. You obviously don't have to stick to the same color palette or blocks or organization of forms, but if you understand how the proportioning works, you can create buildings that like borrow from classicism without looking classical. Obviously, you can have your columns be purple. You can have a different sort of entablature pediment. You could do away with it entirely. The world is your oyster, and starting to understand and use a proportioning system when you're designing, I mean, Minecraft's a game, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity to explore what makes architecture great. So just understanding these proportioning systems will help you create builds that are more, meaningful, and just go have fun with it. That's what it's for. One last note. I haven't uploaded since last July because I just completed my first year of architecture school, which super fun. It was super stressful, time consuming, but I'm probably going to make a recap video about what I learned, the projects I did, and what you can expect if you're going to be in a similar position, just entering like a design college. Hopefully I'll get that out in a short time after, move out ends and everything. And yeah, I hope to keep making not just Minecraft related videos, but videos about architecture as a whole, what's going on with my schooling stuff. And yeah, I'll catch you on the flip side. Like and subscribe if you want to, experience what architecture school is like.